Back on the Young Turks. Now we're going to talk about something that we've discussed a number of times on the show, and a trend that I don't think is being followed closely enough, except by the LA Times, and that is what's happening with the gang warfare and the drug gangs of Mexico. In order to help us do that, we've got Ken Ellingwood from the LA Times on with us to talk about their series, Mexico Under Siege. Ken, welcome to the Young Turks.
Thank you.
Ken, first, what is the series about, Mexico Under Siege?
Well, for about a year and a half, we have been covering the Mexican drug wars pretty intensively from both sides of the border. We've been looking at what's happening in Mexico, the rising level of violence, which has become absolutely extreme, and we've been covering as well how this all plays out on the U.S. side of the border in terms of spillover crime and violence along the border area, arms trafficking from the United States south into Mexico, and the effect of the drug trade on the U.S. So we've been really trying to shine a light on the narco violence that's really taken a severe form in the last 3 years. And we've been at this for about a year and a half fairly intensively.
Ken, I don't know if you have the numbers in front of you, but I'm very curious as to how much the violence has increased in Mexico.
Oh, it's been extraordinary. We do keep track of the numbers as well as we can. There are not official numbers frequently issued, at least. They come out with them periodically, but we're talking about close to 14,000 people dead in Mexico in the last just under 3 years. That was when the president of Mexico, Felipe Calderón, took office in late 2006 and announced he was going to go after organized crime and he was going to go after the drug cartels. He sent thousands of troops and federal police out on the streets to do that. And that action has helped kind of aggravate the rivalries that already existed between the drug cartels in Mexico, which, for a variety of reasons that I won't get into right this moment, have stepped up violence against each other. And it has been primarily that second aspect, that is the fighting between and among the cartels, and sometimes within cartels, that has produced this skyrocketing violence. This year, we're probably looking at close to 6,000 dead so far. It will probably top last year's number, which was over 6,000 dead. And these are for Mexico just extraordinary numbers. I mean, this is the kind of violence not seen here since the Mexican Revolution nearly 100 years ago.
So, Ken, let me break down two things you mentioned there. One, the numbers: 6,000 this year, 14,000 over the last 3 years. Now, how sure are we that those are direct drug-related deaths? Because sometimes, there'll be a hurricane and they'll say 125 people died, and you find out 123 of them were from a heart attack, and they might or might not have gotten it anyway, right? Are these actual drug murders?
Well, they're murders that are attributed to drug violence in some way. And as I said, that because there's a paucity of official numbers from the federal government, we rely on the Mexican media to keep tally, and they do a pretty thorough job. They try to keep a running tally of the day's fatalities, and from there you can kind of find a good average, find out sort of where the numbers seem to be agreeing, and then try to match those up to what the government gives.
So they're all homicides, right?
They're all homicides, and they're oftentimes, and I was going to make the point, in contrast to the hurricane example that you offered, where indeed people die of, a heart attack induced by the panic of a hurricane. A lot of these deaths are the hallmarks of an organized crime hit or a narco hit. These are not people who are necessarily just knifed in the back or shot once. They're oftentimes shot multiple times by automatic weapons,
I want to get
semi-automatic weapons.
Ken, I want to get into that in a second, but let me do one last thing about the numbers.
Yeah.
Is this the again? You probably don't have these numbers in front of you, but I'm really curious as to what the kind of the murder rate was before, what it is now, and how much of it we think is extra from the because if there was normally 60,000 murders and 6,000 of them are drug related, you say, all right, that's 10%. That's really bad, but okay. But if there's like 300 murders normally and there's 6,000 drug murders, then you say, my God. You see my point?
Yeah. Well, you're almost at the my God point in Juarez. I happen to know Juarez. I've reported there a number of times, and the murder rate up there, it's a border city, and it's always had its share of violence. And border cities can be kind of sketchy places, but it had, if I remember my numbers right, before all this began, 300 murders a year, I think would be probably on the high side of the average. Right now, so far this year, there are 2,000 murders in Juarez. Last year, there were 1,600 murders in Juarez. So it's clear that we're talking about an explosion of violence there.
There's an order of magnitude there. Yes, there's definitely
an order of magnitude, right? It's undeniable. I mean, it's not it's not something that anybody disputes. What's going on in Juarez is a very vicious turf war between two trafficking groups, and everybody in town knows that's what's going on, and there's been a lot of sort of collateral violence off of that. But the bottom line is that Juarez is in the grips of a major wave of drug violence.
Ken, I want to get back to how this all got started in just a second, but you mentioned the gruesome deaths, and we're talking to Ken Ellingwood of the Los Angeles Times, and I read one of your articles about what happened in Guerrero recently. Tell us about that, and tell us, what we're dealing with here as a matter of severity.
Well, what happened there is something that's been happening around the country with increasing regularity, and that is that they found in that episode, if I'm remembering right, 9 decapitated men, and those deaths were attributed to some kind of drug gang reprisal. The whole phenomenon of decapitations has become just a regular fact of life now in this very violent landscape that we see in Mexico. Decapitations are becoming kind of routine. It's a way for one drug gang to send a message to a rival drug gang, and the violence can be very, very severe. I mean, there have been cases where people not only have been decapitated but actually dismembered and left with a handwritten sign saying this is against you, and sending a message to a rival drug trafficking organization. We're talking about violence that's just absolutely over the top.
Ken, it's become so common that I read another one of your articles about the glossary of new words that have come up. Tell us a little bit about these new words that they're using, because these events have become so common.
Yeah, well, as with any sort of phenomenon, once a culture or a society is exposed to something for long enough, they sort of have to start coming up with a vocabulary for expressing what they're talking about. In this case, it's the news media in Mexico, which we cover very close. We follow very closely. We track what they're reporting. We read their stories. We listen to their reports. And you can begin to see, as this drug war escalates, a whole new kind of language that's cropping up around it to describe some of these, tendencies. I'll give you a couple of examples. One word that you see more and more is levantón, which means a kind of a pickup, and it refers to a specific kind of kidnapping. There's kidnapping for ransom, and that's called something else. That's called, the word for kidnapping is secuestro. A levantón is, generally speaking, a case of somebody being seized by force, generally one member or members of one drug trafficking organization being seized by another and taken away, probably tortured, and then killed, and oftentimes the bodies are dumped in some public location. Oftentimes the bodies are left in the trunk of a car, which has given rise to another word in this rather grim vocabulary, which is encajuelado, which comes from the Spanish word cajuela, or the word in Mexico for a car trunk. So when somebody's encajuelado, they're left dead in the trunk of a car, and the news media they use that word routinely now. And cobijado is another one. The bodies found in the trunk of a car can be left wrapped in a blanket, usually taped up, and the word for blanket is cobija. So encobijado is blanketed, wrapped in a blanket.
You know that the murder has gotten out of hand when they have a word for a murder specifically done and left, body left in the trunk, but also with a blanket. I mean,
yeah.
Okay, I mean, now we got 800 different kinds of murders, and they're all more gruesome. They're all meant to send a different sign about how tough they are. And by the way, I got it. They're tough.
And there are words for specific kinds of executions. Some of the words have been in the language for years, but you begin to see them more and more now, and they become kind of part of everyday language, or at least everyday presentation in the news media, which people are exposed to.
Hey, we're talking to Ken. We're talking to Ken Ellingwood from the Los Angeles Times. They're doing a series called Mexico Under Siege. Before we run out of time, Ken, I want to get to why this began. Why in 2006 does it go from normal drug gangs with terrible gang violence to this absolute out-of-control epidemic? What was it about Calderon saying that I'm going to take them on that sparked an internal gang warfare?
Well, some of that violence was already taking place, and one of the reasons that Calderon launched this war, if you want to call it that, is what he has called it, was because there was escalating violence in certain zones of the country as drug gangs fought for turf. When he launched his effort, it was, as one analyst has described it to me, and we've had this quote in a story, it was like hitting the wasp's nest. And sending the soldiers and sending the police out to try to crack down has really roiled the whole, drug underworld, and it aggravated the rivalries. It made it somewhat more difficult for the drug trafficking organizations to carry out their normal activities, and so it created kind of more friction between them and among them to move drugs through Mexico onto the border and across the border into the United States. And so that was a key factor in increasing this violence after 2006. There's also some other things that have been happening in recent years. There are generational changes. There have been a number of, within the drug trafficking organizations, there have been a number of leaders of these groups who've been arrested or killed. One good example is the Arellano Felix organization based in Tijuana. As the leaders of that, or the traditional leaders of that group, got thrown in jail or killed, it left a vacuum of leadership. These younger folks who were underneath them came up through the ranks, very vicious, very quick to use violence, and they started struggling for the spoils of the empire. And so within this particular group, there's been a lot of violence over gaining control of the Arellano Felix turf.
Hey, Ken, let me run one last thing by you. I read somewhere that the problem was in the past, the Mexican government had almost a de facto truce with the gangs, and that when Calderon lifted that truce, it led to, obviously, violence between the government and the gangs, but then that violence escalated to within the gangs. Is there some degree of truth in that?
Well, I think you can go back a little bit even farther than that. I think one of the things that has been a factor in all of this rising violence is that before the PAN took over power in 2000, the previous government really did have kind of pacts and arrangements with the drug trafficking organizations, and in a sense managed drug smuggling through Mexico for many years, and it was kind of directed from on high. Well, once the former ruling party, which is called the PRI, once it lost power, a lot of those arrangements were thrown out the window, and the landscape, both politically and in terms of this violence, became much more messy.
Oh, that's very interesting. You know, we're going to have you back on to talk about how we begin to solve this. We certainly don't have time today on that. But
right.
Very, very interesting. Ken Ellingwitz from the Los Angeles Times. Their series is called Mexico Under Siege. Ken, thanks so much for joining us on the Young Turks today.
Please do it. It was fun.
Thank you. We'll be right back.